Nshira had once believed that love, like the river, flowed freely, the gift of the heart, untouched by greed. But Obadil was teaching her a different lesson, one filled with shadows and sharp edges. At first, life in his compound had felt like a dream. His home was grand for a man of his status, built from strong wood, decorated with fine mats, and filled with servants who moved swiftly at his command. Obadil had dressed her in the finest cloth, adorned her neck with coral beads, and paraded her before the village like a prize. "You are the most beautiful woman in all the land," he whispered, his hands warm against her skin. But beauty was not enough for him. Soon, she noticed the way his gaze lingered whenever she cried, when she pricked her finger while peeling yams, when a tale from an elder moved her to sorrow, when a song of longing touched her soul. She saw how his hands clenched, how his breathing quickened. At first, she thought it was concern. Then she saw the way his wealth grew. The baskets of gold, the fields that seemed to bear fruit overnight, the traders who arrived at his doorstep with fine wares, all eager to do business with the man favored by the gods. It did not take long for her to understand the truth. Her tears were his fortune. At first, Obadil tried to coax them gently. "You are too delicate to do hard labor, my love," he said one evening, pulling her away from the pounding mortar. "Sit, let the servants work." She obeyed. "You should not trouble yourself with village matters. Stay inside, rest." She obeyed. He brought her gifts, sang to her, whispered sweet words. But Nshira, though new to the world of men, was no fool. She began to see the cage forming around her, each bar carefully placed, lined with honeyed words and soft touches. And when sweetness did not work, cruelty took its place. One evening, a heavy storm struck the village. Nshira, longing for the feel of rain on her skin, ran outside, her laughter ringing like a bell. She twirled in the downpour, arms spread wide, testing the sky. But when she returned, drenched and breathless, she found Obadil waiting. His face was dark with anger. "You shamed me," he spat, gripping her wrist. "Dancing in the rain like a common girl. Do you know what people will say?" She flinched at his tone. "I did not mean." He shook her hard. "Do you think this is a game? Do you know what you are?" She gasped as he pulled her closer, his grip bruising. His eyes burned, not with love, but with hunger. "You are my fortune, Nshira. My blessing." His voice turned softer, more dangerous. "Do not forget that." That night, she lay awake, staring at the thatched roof. Something inside her had cracked. As the days passed, the warmth between them cooled. Nshira no longer laughed as freely, no longer sang as she once did. She felt the weight of Obadil's greed pressing against her spirit, suffocating her. One evening, she walked to the riverbank, seeking solace in the water's song. The moon hung low, casting silver ripples across the surface. She dipped her toes in, sighing at the familiar embrace of her former home. Then, the water stirred. A whisper rose from the depths. "Live, child of the waves. He will drain you dry." Nshira gasped, her heart pounding. The river spirits, they had found her. She knelt, pressing her hands into the cool mud. "But I love him," she murmured. "I chose this path." The river swirled, faster now. Love does not take. Love does not bind. The chains around you are not love. A tear slipped down her cheek. The wind howled. Then, for the first time, she heard the voice of the Queen Mother of the Waters. "A storm is coming, daughter. If you do not flee, it will drown you." The wind stilled. The river grew silent. Nshira pressed a hand to her heart. She had a choice to make. That night, she returned to Obadil's compound. He was already waiting, seated on a fine mat, surrounded by his growing fortune. His eyes lit up when he saw her swollen eyes, the dried tears on her cheeks. You cried, he said, voice thick with pleasure. Good. She stopped in her tracks. Is that all you care about? She whispered. His smile faltered. Of course not, my love. But don't you see? Every tear brings us more wealth. You do not have to suffer, just a little sadness, and we will never want for anything. Nshira felt the walls close in. No. Obadil frowned. What do you mean, no? She stood taller. I will not live in a house where my pain is a currency. His face darkened. You think you can leave me? She turned toward the door. Obadil lunged forward, grabbing her wrist. Nshira, don't be foolish. I made you. Without me, you are nothing. She looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw him for what he truly was. Not a man in love. A man in need. A man who would never stop taking. With a sudden burst of strength, she ripped her hand free. And she ran. Out of the house. Past the startled servants. Into the night. She did not stop until she reached the riverbank. Until she felt the water lap at her ankles. Until she was free. Behind her, in the distance, she could hear Obadil's furious shouts. But she did not look back. She never would. For the first time since she stepped onto land, Nshira was truly herself again. And this time, she would not be caught. The night air was thick with the scent of damp earth as Nshira ran. Her bare feet pounded against the soft ground, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Behind her, the distant shouts of Obadil's rage echoed through the trees, but she did not slow down. She could not afford to. Her body, though human, still carried the memory of the sea's freedom, the way the waves had once cradled her, the way the currents had danced around her. But here, on land, the air felt heavy, the ground unyielding beneath her feet. Still, she pushed forward, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the riverbank just as the moon slipped behind the clouds, casting the land into eerie darkness. The river was alive, its waters shifting and churning as if it sensed her distress. Nshira fell to her knees at the edge, her hands trembling as she touched the cool surface. Mother, hear me, she whispered. The water rippled. A mist rose from the river, swirling into the shape of a woman, tall, regal, her form woven from shimmering silver. The Queen Mother of the Waters. Her voice was like the tide, both soothing and relentless. Daughter, you have seen the truth. Nshira's throat tightened. I was a fool. I thought he loved me. The Queen Mother's eyes gleamed like the deep sea. Love does not bind. Love does not take. He was never worthy of you. A lump formed in Nshira's throat. What do I do now? The river stirred, whispering secrets. You must leave this land, child of the waves. He will not stop hunting you. Nshira's stomach twisted. She knew Obadil well enough to understand that his pride would never allow him to accept her escape. He had lost his fortune, and she was the key to getting it back. He would come for her. The Queen Mother's gaze softened. But you are not alone. A breeze rustled through the trees, and a shadow stepped forward from the darkness. Nshira's breath caught in her throat. An old woman stood at the edge of the clearing, her back slightly bent with age, her face lined with wisdom. Her eyes, however, were sharp as a blade. This one has been waiting for you, the Queen Mother murmured before her form dissolved into mist, sinking back into the river's embrace. The old woman stepped closer, her gaze never leaving Nshira's face. You are lost, she said simply. Nshira swallowed hard, nodding. The woman studied her for a moment, then sighed. Come, child. The night is long, and the forest is not kind to the unprotected. Nshira hesitated. Could she trust this stranger? Then, the rustling in the distance, the unmistakable sound of footsteps approaching. She had no time to decide. With one last glance at the river, Nshira followed the old woman into the shadows of the forest. The woman led her through a winding path, moving swiftly despite her age. The forest was alive with the calls of nocturnal creatures, owls hooting from the branches, insects humming in the tall grass. At last, they arrived at a small hut nestled beneath the thick branches of an ancient baobab tree. The hut was modest, built from dried reeds and clay, yet it radiated a sense of warmth and safety. Inside, a fire crackled in the corner, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling, filling the air with a mixture of earthy scents. The old woman gestured for Nshira to sit. "I am called Nana Akua," she said as she poured a steaming cup of herbal tea. "Drink. It will calm your spirit." Nshira accepted the cup, her hands still shaking. The old woman watched her carefully. "You are not of this world, are you?" Nshira's eyes widened. "How did you?" Nana Akua chuckled. "I have lived many seasons, child. I know when a soul does not belong to the earth." Nshira looked down, her heart heavy. "I gave up the sea to know love." The old woman's expression darkened. "And instead, you found a man who sought to own you." Nshira nodded, shame burning in her chest. Nana Akua reached out, her hand warm and calloused. "You are not the first woman to be deceived by a man's hunger. And you will not be the last." A tear slipped down Nshira's cheek. Nana Akua sighed. "But you are strong, child. And strength is what you will need because the storm is not over yet." Nshira wiped her face. "He won't stop looking for me, will he?" The old woman shook her head. "No. Not until he has what he wants." Nshira clenched her fists. "Then I must go far away. Somewhere he will never find me." The old woman studied her for a long moment. Then, she stood and pulled a small bundle from the corner of the hut. "If you wish to disappear, you must first become someone new." She unraveled the bundle, revealing a simple woven dress, the color of the earth, plain and unremarkable. "Put this on. You must leave behind the woman he remembers." Nshira hesitated, then nodded. She shed the fine garments Obadil had given her, letting them fall to the floor like the past she was leaving behind. She pulled on the simple dress, feeling lighter already. Nana Akua stepped back, nodding in approval. "Good. Now, there is one more thing." She reached into a clay pot and pulled out a small vial filled with a dark, shimmering liquid. "This is a gift from the spirits of the forest," she said. "Drink it, and your scent will vanish. No hounds will track you. No man will dream of your face." Nshira hesitated for only a moment before taking the vial and swallowing its contents. It was bitter, tinged with something ancient, something powerful. Nana Akua smiled. "It is done. By morning, you will be just another traveler, and Obadil's greed will never lead him to you again." Nshira exhaled, a feeling of freedom washing over her. She was truly leaving the past behind. But deep in her heart, she knew her journey was far from over. Somewhere beyond these forests, her true fate awaited her. And this time, she would write her own destiny. The morning sun filtered through the thick canopy as Nshira emerged from Nana Akua's hut, her heart lighter but her path uncertain. The old woman had given her new clothes and a potion to erase her scent, but she had also given her something far greater, wisdom. "You must go west," Nana Akua had told her. "Beyond the great rivers and golden savannas, there is a land where he cannot follow." With her past behind her, Nshira set out into the wild, her bare feet kissing the earth, her spirit bracing for whatever lay ahead. The journey west was perilous. Thieves lurked in the forests, their eyes gleaming with hunger. Spirits whispered from the trees, some kind, others dangerous. But Nshira, though once a daughter of the sea, was learning the ways of the land. One night, she met a cunning trickster, an old man wrapped in a tattered cloak, his smile sharp as a blade. "You walk like a lost fish in a world of leopards," he mused. "Where are you headed, little traveler?" Nshira hesitated. Could she trust him? The old man chuckled. "Fear will slow your steps, girl. But I will tell you a secret for a price." She had no gold, only her wits. So she offered him a story instead, one of love, loss, and betrayal. When she finished, the old man sighed. "Oh, love is a terrible storm. But listen well, fish-tanned girl. Beyond the burning sands lies a kingdom untouched by greed. There, a prince searches for a wife not of beauty, but of soul. Perhaps, little traveler, you will find more than safety." Nshira thanked him, her heart stirring with curiosity. A prince? A kingdom untouched by greed? It was worth the risk. The journey through the desert tested her strength. Days under the relentless sun, nights curled against the cold earth. But the words of the trickster echoed in her mind. At last, she reached the borders of a grand kingdom bathed in gold and ivory, its people dressed in garments woven from the sun's own light. This was Azana, the kingdom of wisdom and power. She entered the city unnoticed, another wanderer among many. The streets were filled with merchants selling spices and storytellers weaving magic with words. The air thrummed with life. Then she heard it. "The prince seeks a wife," a woman whispered. "But not of riches. He asks for one who carries both pain and kindness." Nshira's breath caught. Could it be true? Prince Kwame was not like Obadil. Where Obadil had worn greed like a second skin, Kwame was a man of quiet strength, his dark eyes filled with a longing only Nshira recognized, the longing of one who had suffered, yet remained unbroken. By fate or chance, Nshira was chosen to stand before him, among many women who sought his hand. When he looked at her, he did not see a beauty to possess, but a soul to understand. And for the first time, Nshira did not feel like prey. She felt seen. Days turned to weeks. In the grand palace, Nshira was no longer a lost mermaid. She was a woman learning to love again. But fate had one final test for her. One night, under the silver glow of the moon, Kwame asked her, "Tell me your truth. Who are you?" And so, Nshira told him everything, her past, her pain, the truth of her tears. She expected fear, disbelief, even rejection. But Kwame only took her hands in his and said, "Then let your tears fall in joy, not sorrow." And so, for the first time, Nshira wept not for loss, but for love. Her tears soaked into the earth, and where they fell, golden flowers bloomed, not wealth stolen from suffering, but prosperity born from love. And in that moment, she knew. She had finally found home. The kingdom of Azana flourished under the reign of Prince Kwame, a leader both wise and kind. In its golden halls, Nshira found a love she had never known before. But even as she settled into this new life, the whispers of the past never truly faded. Though she had found peace, Obadil had not forgotten her. Far away in his ruined estate, Obadil burned with rage. He had lost everything, his wealth, his status, his pride. But the loss that haunted him most was Nshira's tears, the fortune that had slipped through his fingers. For months, he searched, following the faintest rumors, bribing merchants and travelers. Then, one evening, a drunken trader whispered of a woman in Azana whose presence had turned the prince's fortune to gold. Obadil knew. She was still out there. His fingers curled into fists. If he could not have her willingly, he would take what was his. Azana was a kingdom of peace, its people unaccustomed to war. But when Obadil arrived with a band of mercenaries, their greed fueled by promises of riches, the city trembled under his wrath. "Give her to me," Obadil demanded before the palace gates. "And I will spare your people." The council of elders gathered in haste, murmuring in fear. The people loved Nshira, yet the threat of war loomed over them. But before they could decide, Prince Kwame stepped forward. "You have no power here, Obodil," he declared, his voice steady. "Nshira is not yours to take." Obodil's lips twisted in rage. "Then your kingdom will burn." That night, as fires threatened the city's edge, Nshira stood at the palace balcony, watching the darkness unfold. Fear threatened to consume her. But deep within, she felt something stir. She had been running all her life. From her past. From pain. From herself. No more. A voice rose within her, ancient, powerful, unmistakable. "The Queen Mother of the Waters. Child of the sea, you were never meant to be caged." And in that moment, something inside Nshira snapped like a tide breaking free from the shore. She had given up the ocean for love, but love did not mean silence. She would not be prey again. When dawn broke, Nshira stood before the city gates, draped in white, her eyes burning with a power long forgotten. Obodil sneered. "Have you come to beg?" But Nshira only lifted her hands to the sky. And the heavens answered. The air shifted, thick with the scent of salt and storm. A rumble echoed in the distance. The rivers surrounding Azana began to rise. Obodil's men, once arrogant, now staggered back in fear as water surged through the city streets, a great tidal force summoned by Nshira's will. And then she wept. Not from sorrow, but from power reclaimed. Her tears struck the ground, and where they fell, golden roots coiled around the invaders' feet, hardening into unbreakable chains. The mercenaries fell, trapped, their greed turned against them. But for Obodil, there would be no mercy. The water swirled around him, pulling him toward the river's edge. He thrashed, cursed, screamed, but the waters knew justice. As he was dragged beneath, the last thing he saw was Nshira standing tall, untouchable, divine. Then, silence. With the battle over, Azana rejoiced. The people, once fearful, now looked upon Nshira not as a foreigner, but as a protector, a goddess reborn. But Nshira, despite her power, was still just a woman who longed for love. She turned to Kwame, expecting fear in his eyes. But instead, he smiled. "You are more than I ever dreamed." And so, with the kingdom safe and love unshaken, Nshira was crowned as Queen of Azana, not just as Kwame's wife, but as a ruler in her own right. And in Nshira's reign, Azana flourished beyond imagination. Where she walked, prosperity followed, not from greed, but from balance and wisdom. Her golden tears no longer symbolized suffering but became a blessing to those in need, shared freely among her people. She never returned to the sea. For she had found her home not in water, but in love, in strength, in the land that had embraced her. It is said that even today, if you stand by the great rivers of Azana and whisper her name, you may catch a glimpse of golden flowers blooming on the water's edge. And if you listen closely, the wind will tell you her story. The story of Nshira, the mermaid who wept gold, the woman who defied fate, the queen who turned her pain into power.